So there was this man. He's lying in bed. It's about 3:20 in the morning. He's just been sort of softly woken up. Not by anything in particular, it seems. But, well, he's awake now. It's clearly the dead of night. So he wants to go back to sleep. Doesn't think much of it. But then he starts to notice this feeling. This feeling building within him, starting like the chest area, sort of moving out and intensifying as it spreads. He's not sure what to make of the feeling. Doesn't feel like anger, sadness, tiredness, joy. It's not familiar to him. And then suddenly, as the feeling gets finally spread all the way throughout his body, it has another spike of intensity, and this time there's a clear direction to this feeling. It's telling him to get up. It's telling him to get up out of bed. Now, this man is not a superstitious man. He tends to roll his eyes whenever somebody knocks on wood or avoids going under a ladder or listens to their horoscope or anything like that. That stuff is all just silly to him. He doesn't need it. So, this feeling to get up, it doesn't make any sense to get up right now. So he's not going to. But this feeling keeps getting more and more intense in waves. Every time he denies it, it comes back stronger. It's undeniable. The feeling keeps coming on to him and coming on to him. It feels like his soul is leaving his body, but trying to take his body with it. It feels like some force is pulling on him, tugging him upwards. Eventually he can't fight it, not anymore, and his muscles move, and he gets out of bed. He slides his feet off of the edge and takes the blanket off, plants his feet firmly on the ground before stopping again, because he didn't want to do this. Why is this happening? So he tries to fight the feeling again. This time, the feeling doesn't have as hard of a time overcoming him. So after a couple seconds of sitting there, he stands up. And he's kind of freaked out right now. All kinds of explanations are running through his mind. Sleepwalking, hallucination, maybe he's just dreaming. Some kind of strange muscle memory or spasm or something. He's not sure what to make of what's going on. But he's sure he can explain it if he just, stops being silly and gets back into bed. But, of course, the feeling doesn't let up. It's pulling on him more. He's still fighting it. But this time, he can kind of get a clearer sense of where it's headed. He gets the feeling that this feeling wants to take him outside. Now. He looks at the clock, it's 3:26 in the morning. There's no way he's going to go outside now. Why would he do that? Why on earth would he get up out of bed and leave his house entirely in the dead of the night just because of some strange, as of yet unexplained feeling? But he can't fight this feeling. Not for very long. He feels himself slip and take a step. The next step, it comes a lot faster than the last one. Still a couple seconds in between, but clearly the feeling has some momentum going. After taking a few steps, he resigns himself to the fact that he might be stepping outside in some strange sleepwalk, psychosis, whatever. He'll figure out what it was in the morning. He'll Google it or ask his doctor or something. So he's come to accept this. He moves to shake his wife awake, let her know what's going on. You know, let her in. Say like, you know, well, when he thinks about it, he doesn't know what he would say because it all sounds crazy. I'm taking a walk outside at 3 a.m., not of my own volition. Just wanted to let you know. But still, he wants to let his wife know, just in case, you know. His hand goes to shake his wife's shoulder, but a couple inches away from that, the feeling stops him there too. Tries really hard to overcome that feeling. He's like, what the fuck? That's my wife. I need to tell her what's going on. But as hard as he fights to overcome it, the feeling fights back. And he's not able to move his hand from that spot, just hovering over her shoulder. And when he tries to open his mouth to call her name, he can't do that either. He reacts to this situation with despair and exasperation, and during that reaction takes 3 more steps towards the door. His mind starts to drift to the idea of possession. He dismisses it. Of course, ghosts aren't real. Like, that's obvious. But it's the only explanation that makes... Well, if the only explanation that makes sense is one that's false, then it has to be some other explanation. So, keep looking. After that dialogue, his hand is on the doorknob to his bedroom. At this threshold, he tries to fight it, but something in him just says, just go with it. So his hand turns the knob, quietly closes the door, and he starts to walk towards the front door. Moves to put his shoes on, because of course he wants to put his shoes on. The feeling doesn't let him. Kind of terrified now, thinking about all the nails and bugs and rocks that he might step on, going who knows where. But he's tried his hardest to fight this feeling. He tries again, but he doesn't succeed. He reaches for his jacket. It's a little chilly outside, and the feeling lets him do this. He grabs his jacket and puts it on with what feels like his own volition for the first time in a good bit. And feels kind of annoyed at this. Like, why would it let me do that, of all things? And I says, well, okay, it letting me, that's not, this is some sort of mental health illness or something, it's not letting you do anything. That was a fluke, that was random. But, well, he thinks to himself, at least I get my jacket. And then he thinks to himself, fuck, am I really there? Am I really there in this situation? Have I accepted it that much where I'm thankful for having a jacket, accepting that I'm gonna go for a walk outside at, again, 3 in the fucking morning? Gets his jacket. Excuse me. He grabs his jacket, opens the front door, and off he goes out into the world. He gets hit by a wave of cold air. The night around him seems a little otherworldly. He's very rarely stayed up this late and doesn't go outside that often. It's possible that this is the only time he's ever been outside in the dead of the night. And it's a weird vibe. Everything's silent. Except for the little noises every once in a while, which stand out a lot more. Everything's still and eerie. He feels weirdly a strong sense of belonging. He feels like he fits here more than he fits other places. It's kind of soothing, despite the eeriness. But with those observations, he's on the sidewalk, a ways down. He thinks to himself, hey, maybe this is just like a brisk walk. You know, I've heard obviously it's healthy to take walks, you know. So maybe my body just decided, like, you need a walk. And he sort of groans at that idea, that explanation. Says to himself, you're losing it. But his body keeps walking. His legs keep striding. His arms are sometimes swinging, but they are permissive to protests if he feels like crossing his arms or something like that. Just scratching his nose. He walks down the sidewalk. Comes to... He lives on a cul-de-sac, see? He goes around the bend of the cul-de-sac and thinks, okay, hopefully I turn back home now. But he passes that point. He crosses an intersection to the next block. He thinks, maybe it's a walk around the block. Then I'll get back. He does turn right, go start following the perimeter of that block. When he gets to the end there, turns left and heads that way. He thinks, okay, so maybe it's just a walk around the block. That's not too bad. I'm on the sidewalk. Doesn't matter, I don't got shoes. It's kind of nice out here. I'm glad I have my jacket. It's chilly, but you know, it's nice to have some calm, some stillness. But when he gets to the end of that block, he doesn't turn left, he keeps walking. And here is a longer strip of sidewalk. It's not a block anymore. So now the dread picks up even more. He doesn't know how long he's going to walk. He tries really hard to just turn around and go home. For a while. For a long time. And by the time he gives up on trying that, he has walked maybe a mile or two. He's never great at estimating those things. And he's in a part of the neighborhood that he's not especially familiar with. He doesn't know anyone who lives there. He doesn't really drive by there that often. Lord knows he doesn't go on walks. Speaking of which, his body's starting to get tired. It's a much longer walk than used to taking, so it's starting to wear on him quite a bit. So he keeps walking. He walks all the way to the end of the road there. To the end of the sidewalk. And then he pauses. His body stops. Still, it's that feeling. Doesn't feel like it's him doing it. He pauses and he stands there for a while. Barefoot. Feeling colder every second. It's a little bit windy tonight too. Good thing he brought his jacket. He stares into the forest for longer than he realizes. His mind is still. When he realizes what's happened, he is at the border to enter the forest. This is not where he wants to go. He was never the camping type. Fuck, who wants to walk into a forest at 3 in the morning, barefoot? He starts thinking about medical bills or funeral bills. But to his surprise, he doesn't walk into the forest. He walks up to the trunk of one of the trees. One with some low-hanging branches. And he climbs on top. He did like climbing trees as a kid. this is the first part of this whole thing that feels at all familiar to him. Climbs a bit higher than he was used to going, though. Still driven by this feeling. That doesn't seem like him. And when he gets to the highest point that this tree can offer, he reaches out and grabs the limb of another nearby tree that has limbs that are much higher up and that goes much taller. He is terrified, but somehow his body is calm. Silently climbing up the tree, doing things that he's never quite done. You know, he has some tree climbing experience, but he's never, like, jumped to grab a branch before. He starts to dissociate. His mind starts to distract itself, thinking about what the schedule for tomorrow should be. This may be also partly him half going back to sleep, but his body continues to climb, and he comes to when he breaks through the treetops and finds himself at the very top of that tree. He looks out onto the world. He wonders, how could this be affecting him so profoundly? He knows what the world looks like from above. He's seen Google Maps, he's seen drone footage. He knows that he lives in one small house of many small houses among many small neighborhoods, among cities, states, countries, land masses, among trees and squirrels and birds and fruit. He knows that he lives under the moon. He's seen the stars before. And yet, this moment, at the top of that tree, looking out, the way he came, onto the world he knows so much, from an unfamiliar perspective. No expression he could attempt to make is able to capture the feeling of joy rising in his chest. wonder. Excitement and curiosity. It doesn't make sense, just like this feeling doesn't make sense. But it's suddenly obvious to him to just accept what's going on. He is that. He's a part of all of this. Something made him get up out of bed at 3 in the morning and walk barefoot and climb a tree so tall that it terrifies him. Just to look out on what he always knew was there. And he sees the world anew. He's still familiar with all the things he was familiar with before. None of his models for how things work have changed. He hasn't taken any drugs, gone to any therapies. But he just feels different now. That feeling of joy and wonder. It ebbed and flowed, but it never really left him after that. It's a full moon. And he looks up at the moon, watches it for a bit, and says, "Thank you." He tells himself afterwards that the feeling made him do that. The same feeling that made him get up out of bed and climb this tree. But really, and if he searched his heart, he would know. He said that. Though he would never admit it to anyone, not even himself. Takes a big deep inhale and exhale. And then he starts to climb the tree. At first, you can't tell whether it's that feeling again or whether it's him. But as he climbs down the tree, by the time he reaches the end, by the time he reaches the shorter tree, it feels like him again. And he says, okay, yeah, let's get out of here. He's cold as fuck. His feet hurt like hell. But that joy is still running strong through him. So he enjoys the weird spongy coolness of the grass. The hard, sandy, but somehow accommodating feeling of the asphalt and the sidewalk. And when a gust of wind blows and gives him a chill, he giggles. He can't help it. He's not sure why. But at the moment, he doesn't really mind. He comes back to his street, and he's happy to see his street. He never thought he'd be happy to see his street, but the familiarity is dancing with his joy. And he can't help but smile. He's really happy to see his house again. All kinds of memories come up in his mind. He doesn't see them logically any different, but it feels like each one is profound. And again, the joy dances with that profoundness and with the familiarity. He opens his front door. Puts his jacket up. Has a slight moment of panic when he realizes he didn't lock the door, but it seems like everything's fine. The hallway fills him with warm feelings, and he gets really excited. And he runs into his bedroom, and he sees his wife lying there. And it feels like every nerve, every cell in his body is just cheering. He's elated. That's his wife. That's Sarah. The joy is dancing with ages of familiarity, an ocean of profundity, dancing with love, heartbreak, dancing with boredom and anger, dancing with interest and humor, dancing with all of the times that he has spent with her. Every time he's touched her, every time she's touched him, every time they've hugged, held hands, kissed, had sex, watched a movie together, talked with friends, celebrated victories, and maligned defeats. Every time he has ever looked at her, gets stirred up, and it's alive. It's electric. And he's happier than he's ever been. His smile is really starting to hurt. But why stop? He can't anyways. He leans down, very gently kisses his wife on the forehead, the way he knows not to wake her up. Smile comes back stronger than ever. He feels like his chest is going to explode. He doesn't care. It's wonderful. How did you ever see how wonderful it all was before? How did he never feel this way before? Those questions fade into the back of his mind to be investigated passively as his life goes on. He ends up gaining several insights about the nature of feeling and happiness and joy and familiarity. But he never shares them. He's an office worker. He's not a spiritual type. It's not like this has converted him. He still nearly gags when he sees someone try to avoid stepping on the sidewalk, but for tonight, he's done all he needs to. He's done all he's going to. He slips back into bed, having a moment of realization about, a moment of remembering that moment when he first got out of the bed, how he felt then and how he feels now. Once again, he says thank you, but this time he doesn't deny that that was from him. He's too giddy to lie to himself. He gets under the covers. They feel unbelievable. So warm and soft. course, his joy dances with this sensation as well. At the moment, he thinks he'll probably never stop smiling. He does the next day, but as he drifts off to sleep, his mind is filled with all kinds of incredibly vivid visions, sights and sounds. You can tell he's not dreaming yet. But they're coming alive. He sees visions of rabbits, stars, trees, patterns of energy that you can't make out, waves of feeling that aren't unfamiliar, but at the same time feel completely different. He sees a lot of blue, images of candy canes, flying saucers, the frisbee kind. He sees wide open plains, the sun going down behind the mountains. He sees the face of his boss and seems to feel what he's feeling for a little bit, strangely. He sees cars. He feels the moonlight again, even though he knows he's inside, and it doesn't reach into his room. He sees himself age. He sees the most inexplicably warm and inviting total void that he's ever seen. Last thing he sees before he drifts into a dreamless sleep is a dog. A terrier. Running across an open field. He watches that for a while. The feeling of giddiness has faded, and the image too fades. He wakes up the next morning out of the blackness. He never tells anyone what happened. They would think he's crazy. He worries for a while that he might be crazy, but nothing like that happens again. For a few days, he's very, very smiley. And for a few weeks, he can't help but smile big every single time he sees Sarah. He lives an otherwise unremarkable life. But he never loses sight of that feeling. And the memory of that night never quite leaves his mind. He dies an old man. And we don't know what happens to him after that.